So our next presentation is Tom Rothsey, who basically lives in the hinterland of Coffs Harbour. That's as good as my geography will work for you, Tom. Tom is an ecologist, an environmental scientist, a reflexologist, and an energy worker. He's very passionate about health, physical, emotional, psychological, spiritual health, and has a lifelong interest in herbal medicine. Tom trained as a reflexologist, incorporating energetic medicine, chakras, and meridians. When Tom's wife Christy was diagnosed with a serious autoimmune condition, Tom used a combination of alternative therapies and information and research based on his formal education from his science degree to support Christy's healing journey. So obviously today Tom is going to be focusing on bodily health, specifically healthy gut. So this would probably be, at least in my opinion, the #1 emerging health trend or health issue this decade of healthy gut. And I am coming across so many people who have leaky gut, who have IBS, who have Crohn's, who have colitis. It's a worldwide epidemic, and Tom's going to be giving us a demonstration on how to make sauerkraut. And this is one of the most potent things for your gut. It's very, very important. And Tom's philosophy is that a healthy gut is essential for our optimal spiritual development. So please make welcome Tom Rothsey.
Hi, I'm Tom. I'd like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of this land and offer my respects to elders past and present. Today I'm going to be working with food. Okay, today I'm going to be working with food. So I would also like to honour the spirit of the food that I'll be using. Everything is imbued with a life force. Even the rocks are alive in some fashion. It might be
just separate them.
The crystal. Naughty crystal. That's my throat chakra. Okay, hear me now? G'day. How's that? Good? G'day. So, very important to eat our food as soon as possible after it's harvested, because the moment any living thing is disconnected from the life force, it starts to decay. Decay means a loss in nutrient value. It also means a loss in energetic value. Fresh food, particularly food that comes straight from the garden, and everybody should have some kind of herb garden at the very least, so you can get fresh, nutritious, medicinal food into you at the height of its powers, and that's what we want. Fermentation of food, it predates history. It's a way not only of preserving the harvest, but augmenting it. Fermentation may be seen as human-directed food spoilage. As I said, everything disconnected from the life force decays. What we're doing with fermentation is setting ecosystem parameters fundamentally that turn that spoilage into augmentation. So the product, after 6 weeks and some love, is a massively, not only probiotic rich food. 2 tablespoons of a properly prepared sauerkraut will contain more live probiotic species and a greater species diversity than an entire capsule of probiotic that you get from the chemist. As well as that, the foods that we traditionally use when we ferment, the cabbage in particular, are incredibly potent medicinal foods. The cabbage, most people are probably aware of the anti-cancer action of the humble cabbage. When we're preparing the sauerkraut, we're going to be massaging. What we're doing there is we're breaking the cell walls. This allows the salt that we're going to add to extract liquid, water basically, from the cabbage, and that's going to provide the brine which is going to cover the cabbage and stop it from forming mold or oxidizing. Okay, so when we're massaging, what we're also doing is breaking the compartment walls between compounds called glucosinolates, which I'll tell you what they do in a second, and an enzyme called myrosinase, which when these two combine, the glucosinolates are transformed into a range of very potent anti-cancer compounds. Cabbage is probably the most potent anti-cancer food there is. Turmeric also, obviously very good. The good thing about once we've broken the cell walls, these compounds are initiated and they're there ready to go as soon as we eat the cabbage. Everyone has probably heard of the traditional remedy for mastitis, where you get a cooled or frozen cabbage leaf and put it on the breast. The green cabbage, the normal green drumhead cabbage, is particularly good for guarding against and helping resolve breast cancers. Researchers in the United States noticed that Polish women in America were getting high rates of breast cancers, whereas Polish women in Poland weren't. And they exhaustively looked at what the difference was, and the women in Poland were still eating sauerkraut. Basically, that was the only difference they could come up with. Okay, I'm going to be making noises and faces because I'm chopping in the purple cabbage, which is the only organic cabbage I could find quickly. They're tougher than the green ones, but that's okay. The purple cabbage, because it's purple, has anthocyanins. The pigmentation is massively high in antioxidant action. So when you're choosing fruits and vegetables, the purple is your friend. Purple carrots, incredibly better as far as antioxidant action and anti-inflammatory action than just your plain old orange carrot. Another thing, I'll talk while I'm chopping. Another thing that I believe we can well do without is there's enough division in the world that we shouldn't add dietary division to that. For me, the most important thing about food is honouring the spirit of it and also being concerned about how it's produced. I love plants. For me, plants have feelings. When you are cutting that cabbage off to harvest it, any food that I harvest, I collect bush medicines from the bush, I grow things myself. Every time I harvest, I give thanks and gratitude. I respect the food. And I know that my knife is causing pain to that plant. It can't scream at me and tell me that. To demonstrate that, there's a plant called the common sensitive plant. It's a mimosa. If you touch it, it retracts its leaves so you can't eat it. The Botanic Gardens locally where we live was digging up a garden bed of that plant, and so we grabbed one and put it in a pot, and my wife sat every day and sent loving thoughts and loving words to this plant, and eventually she could stroke it and it wouldn't retract its leaves. And that's just a normal person like us all and a normal plant. So yeah, let's honour the spirit of the things that we eat and not be concerned about what we choose to eat. What is important though, and Brian earlier mentioned that when he starts talking about dietary purity, that's when people start hating him. You're going to hate me after this. Let's start with water. Water is the foundation of life. Water does much more than we realise. Our traditional model of how solutes enter and exit the cell is fundamentally flawed because there's not enough room on the outer cell membrane for all the required pumps in and out. Russian scientists long ago developed the idea that it is the arrangement of the bipolar water molecules within the cell, the complex arrangements that they form, which determines what comes in and what comes out. Our water is in crisis. They're trying to poison our groundwater. Certainly a lot of people are forcefully medicated by substances put in the water. Just starting with clear water. If you happen to live in a city that fluoridates water, I mean, fluoride's a neurotoxin. It's also a thyroid inhibitor because both fluoride and chlorine will preferentially occupy the receptor sites for iodine on the thyroid. So one of the big drivers of the increasing prevalence of hypothyroidism is fluoridated water. And chlorine does the same thing. Bromine also, iodine, chlorine, fluorine and bromine are all halogens. And in that group, each one of those halogens will displace iodine. Bromine is in processed foods, baked products. Another good thing, I was saying to a lady earlier, okay, I've just roughly chopped that. I'm not going to chop the other half. I mentioned about the concept of ecosystem parameters. We're going to set that right now. I've worked out the optimum ratio of salt to cabbage. But the good news is there's a little bit of wiggle room there, so you don't have to be overly concerned about getting weights exactly right, because there is a bit of room above and below that measurement. But fundamentally, for every half a kilo of chopped cabbage, 1 teaspoon of salt. Most people oversalt their sauerkraut. Oversalting the sauerkraut, well, first it cuts out the, if you put too much salt, it cuts out the first 2 stages of fermentation and goes straight to the tertiary stage. The fermentation of vegetables is pretty much like succession within a forest. I'm using ginger, so that's going on. The lemon myrtle leaves I'm using are not that heavy, and I'll probably put garlic in there as well. Rightio, so that's just under 3/4 of a kilo, so that goes back in there. My pretty red birthday present scale goes back down on the floor. My family learned long ago only to buy me presents that involve food preparation. That's all, and maybe the occasional crystal as well. Okay, so that slightly rounded teaspoon of salt is about 5.5 grams. As I said, there's a bit of wiggle room. We were just under, so I'm putting about 1/3 of a second teaspoon in there. I will probably do the ginger and get everything going before my hands get mucky. Not sure. So, what we're doing here, the cabbage in itself is an amazing food. All of these things are organic, except the lemon myrtle, which is plucked from a tree. But, you know, when you collect medicines from the bush, they're by their very nature organic. You just can't call them that. Organic is important because one of the main things that compromise the human gut is the way we grow our food. Everyone's heard of Roundup, I assume. Glyphosate, which is Roundup, was used as an antibacterial agent before it was used as a herbicide. And it works in exactly the same way by chelating the minerals that are essential for enzyme production. Enzymes are essential for human life. They catalyze all the reactions within the body. Without enzymes, we don't function. Another good thing about the fermentation of food is that it produces lots of enzymes that assist us with the digestion and assimilation of our food, as well as glyphosate not being very good for the gut because it's an antibacterial agent. It also interferes with key processes within the body because it stops us from forming the enzymes that we need to function properly. On my website, which I have cards out at my table if you'd like to go and look, there's a couple of paragraphs on the recipes tab there on just a couple of short paragraphs on just the detrimental effects of glyphosate on the human body. And if you really want to scare yourselves into eating organic food, take 2 minutes and read those few paragraphs and you'll do your darndest to make sure you eat organic food after that. The problem, as I say in that short little article, glyphosate doesn't break down and disappear. That's just a flat out lie. You can get away with lying if you're a multi-billion-dollar corporation. And what it does is it gets sequestered within the soil collards, which are tiny little spaces in the soil which also hold nutrients and water. And any farmer worth their salt likes to have lots of collards in the soil. Glyphosate hides there, and it would be decomposed by bacteria quite nicely if it just sat there, but that's not what happens, because conventional farming, after herbicide application, pretty soon after that follows the application of superphosphate fertilizer, and phosphates in all their forms are the one thing that will liberate glyphosate from the soil collards. So we're setting up a perfect storm for our bodies there. The glyphosate is taken up by the roots of the subsequent crop. It's not quite as potent as it was, so it doesn't kill the plants. What it does is it just gets sequestered in the meristematic tissues, which is just a fancy name for the growing places, and we tend to eat the growing places of plants. We like the fresh tips of our herbs, we like the roots and the rhizomes, we like the seeds and the fruits, and that's where the glyphosate goes. And it ends up in the human body, and not just where you'd expect. Ends up in the urine, obviously, of everybody. They find it in utero. So glyphosate has been isolated from within the placenta, so that's not a very nice thing for our emerging life to be swimming in. And it's also been found in human breast milk, which is not good either. So organic food, do the best you can. That's why we haven't had a holiday in a number of years, because all our money goes on food. Okay, so the cabbage, amazing vegetable. Very highly anti-inflammatory. All of the foods I like to work with have some kind of anti-inflammatory value, because when I do workshops or presentations and there are doctors in the audience, and I say that, in my opinion, 98% of human ills ultimately can be traced back to chronic and inappropriate inflammation in the body, the doctors are the ones there nodding their heads. It's inflammation is really at the root of everything, and all gut dysbiosis has a component of inflammation. The whole leaky gut phenomenon, once your gut's compromised, and the way it's compromised is the ratios of certain key bacteria change there. We have all of the bacteria that are either going to nourish us or potentially kill us on every single thing that we touch. They're all around us. You can't avoid pathogenic bacteria. The best defense against them is to have a strong immune system, and a strong immune system we get from having a good, competent gut. So once that balance of bacteria is disturbed, pathogenic bacteria and also yeast, particularly Candida albicans, can overgrow and compromise the lining of the gut, which then becomes porous. Undigested food particles enter into the bloodstream. Many food particles, unfortunately, at the molecular level, are fairly similar to certain bodily tissues. For example, the protein component of gluten is almost identical to thyroid tissue. So if you have a leaky gut and you eat gluten, gluten passes into your bloodstream. Your immune system goes, "Ooh, can't be having that foreign substance in the body." So the immune system first starts by running around and tagging everything that looks like gluten, and that includes thyroid tissue. And so you'll start taking care of the gluten, but also taking care of your own thyroid cells. Not everybody has a problem with gluten, but everyone who thinks they may have a compromised gut should avoid gluten at all costs until you're satisfied that things are well. And with overgrowth of pathogenic bacteria, all systems of the body are affected by bacteria. Most of our serotonin is made in the gut. Conventional medicine will tell you, well, that means nothing because serotonin can't pass the blood-brain barrier, and that's true, it's a fact. But we're now beginning to realise that the vagus nerve connects the gut to the brain, and this is most likely the superhighway where the gut and the brain communicate with each other. When the gut's out of balance, our neurotransmitters and hormones that determine our mood and our just our cognitive abilities, our memory, all sorts of things are compromised. I think that's probably enough garlic. Okay, so ginger is, apart from the things that most of us know about ginger, a lot of people don't know that it's one of the best natural antivirals on the planet. It's particularly good for that, for the herpes family of viruses, which includes Epstein-Barr and things of that nature, but it also works against other viruses. It has to be fresh. Ginger powder, powdered ginger, is useless from a medicinal point of view. Turmeric powder, no, it's good. Turmeric powder is still medicinal. Ginger has to be fresh. Okey-doke. And so I put some lemon myrtle leaves. Lemon myrtle leaves are Australia's gift to the world, really. It's one of the best natural antibiotics on the planet. It will kill golden staph, and not many things can do that. And when it does kill it, it doesn't come back. Sometimes antibiotics will kill golden staph, but then it just comes back, so they're not actually killing it, they're just knocking it. Okay, so this may take a while. So I was saying before that the succession of bacteria in a vegetable ferment is like succession in a forest. So what happens is we have a primary succession, just like in a forest when a tree comes down you get pioneer species, so too in this, and interestingly enough, so too in the human gut. When we're born, our gut is colonized in exactly the same way as the succession of bacteria within a sauerkraut ferment. To my knowledge, I was the first person in the world to make this connection, and it forms part of my gut repopulation protocol, where all of the pathogenic bacteria are eliminated from the gut, and then it's repopulated using maturing sauerkraut. But there are 4 successional stages. Too much salt takes you straight to stage 3. Too much salt again, or too little salt, and you're getting out of that area where the good bacteria have the advantage into the area where it's more of a level playing field. So if there's pathogens in there, they can grow if you don't get your salt right. But 500 grams of vegetable matter, 1 teaspoon of salt, it's so easy to remember. And there's wiggle room, so you don't even need a scale, just a rough idea. Another key factor of note here is stress. Stress is the #1 killer. If you're stressed, then your gut is not going to be functioning well. Stress interferes again with every system in the human body. So as well as getting back to the notion of purity, pure water, pure food, pure thoughts, pure deeds, pure actions, learn to be non-reactive. Don't let people grind you down, basically. Don't let the state of the world get to you and divert you from your purpose. My purpose here in this bowl is to make a massively probiotic rich, health inducing, life affirming food. My goal in other areas of life is different, but ultimately it's the same goal, because that goal is to do all I can for the greater common good, to do good and to share love and to receive love. It's, in my opinion, it's our true nature is love. I'm squeezing it because when I can get liquid running out of this, it's ready to pack into the jar. Though I may fast forward that one a little bit. So fundamentally, the last thing you want to be concerned about for gut health is, I'm talking about organic food, which is great, but there are certain things that you don't want to put into your body at any cost, and excess sugar is certainly one of those. Excess sugar leads naturally to gut dysbiosis. Excess sugar, they've now discovered, they know that it feeds cancer, but there's now research coming out that it can hasten the formation of cancerous cells. There are foods that we can take if we feel that cancer is an issue. I mean, turmeric is the most amazing food. Again, it needs to be organic to be truly medicinally potent. But yeah, I think Ayurvedic medicine has 800 separate uses for turmeric. And I like to put these health-affirming foods in everything I do. Another ingredient that I like to put in, of course, is love. I'm talking a million miles a minute here. I'm not centered in my heart, but normally if I'm at home doing this, I just take a moment, center, pay respect to the food that I'm working with, the life I'm working with, generate love from the crown, from the feet, unite them in the heart, and just feel love, and then it just comes out the hands. It's something that we all have the power to do. And when food is prepared with love, you're keeping that energy, that energetic integrity. You're not putting any frequencies that are counter to life and health in there. It's just life affirming, and there's nothing more life affirming than love. And I'm sure we've all, see, that's quite good. I'm sure we've all noticed the difference between eating a meal that is being cooked grudgingly and eating a meal that is being cooked with love. There's just no comparison. Exactly the same ingredients, exactly the same chef, but a different energy being put into the food. Okay, that is good enough. There's so much that I could say. We are running late and I'm pressed for time, so I'm not going to say a lot of things that I normally say, but I'm at my table after, and if anyone has any questions, I'm really more than happy to answer them. On my Facebook page, which also bears the name Celestial Roots, there is the opportunity to come up and ask questions, and if you have questions, I mean, I do dietary consulting and things like that, but I also will answer questions for free on my Facebook page. And if you ask a question and it's a good one, I'd like to put it up on the main part of the page and then answer it so everyone who's concerned about that has access to it. If you go to my Facebook page and open the photo stream, every single photo in the photo stream, and there are hundreds of them, either has a recipe attached to it or information about the medicinal virtues of foods and how we can use basically our plant friends to improve the quality of our lives drastically. Okay, fermentation, it produces acidity, and the byproduct is carbon dioxide. Food exposed to oxygen can mold, it can get a nasty kind of yeast called calm yeast, or it can oxidize and just turn a bit rank. So we want to exclude all of those. Acidic, so we want a non-reactive substance, so it's ceramic or glass. You don't really want to be fermenting in stainless steel because the acids are going to dissolve some of the particles of the steel, and you're going to be eating that. So glass is good, or good quality ceramic. Anything that's made in Australia, New Zealand, Canada, United States, the European Union, you can be sure is heavy metal free. That can't be said about ceramics and glasses from other places. Some is, some isn't. So my advice is to source your glass from a country where you know that the law prohibits them having heavy metals in the material. Excluding oxygen, I'm just packing that down as I go. And what that is doing is pushing out all the air, because we want as much of the atmospheric air out as possible. And what I'll do then is, I mentioned exclusion of oxygen. We have an airlock jar here, which has a rubber seal and clips to hold it tight, and a little airlock that fills with water. Vegetables float, we all know that. Holding the vegetables down. Oh look, I've got something right here. These are just These are smaller versions of the lid that comes with that. You can use any good quality glass, glass candle holders or coasters or paperweights or anything, as long as it's, again, has a country of manufacture where you can be sure that there's no nasties in there. But glass is good. Nice. These are like wholesale, like $1.50, I think, which is nothing. Certainly not as much as an organic cabbage costs. Okay, so normally I would fill this up to about there. A byproduct of fermentation is carbon dioxide. It is going to expand this vegetable matter, so you need to give it a bit of room for expansion. Okay, so you would have noticed me carefully peeling off these outer leaves. It's not because I think they're germy and I don't want to eat them, because I've already told you that all of the bacteria that either hurt us or help us are there already. There's nothing I can do to touch that. It's fine. I'll put that in my food and I'll eat that, because I've set ecosystem parameters here. If I sell food, I don't do that. Okay? I'm going to eat this. So this is just for me, so don't worry. You can buy things that I make. Okay, so, and I'm going to put it in there. And so basically what this does is keeps those fine little chopped bits of veggies away from the oxygen. Mold is a worry. I would advise everyone to be concerned about mold, particularly in subtropical climates like this, where there's a lot of rainfall. There's a lot of hidden mold in most of our houses, particularly where they're in flood-prone areas. We don't want it on our food. Most mold that grows on food is fairly benign. Some molds are amongst the most toxic substances that we know, and the upshot of it is it's only 20% of species of mold are known by science. That's 80% of them are completely unknown. It is impossible to ID mold to species level using the human eye. Colour of sporulation is impossible, because many molds will show up to 5 separate colours when they sporulate. So there's nothing you can do to say that that is a safe mould. The CSIRO and the US Department of Agriculture have both looked at the issue of moulds in a liquid medium, which is what this is. And what they've discovered is, as soon as you can see the mould on the top, the spores and, most importantly, the mycotoxins are right through the whole thing. So if it gets mouldy, I can't tell you what to do, but I can certainly advise you to throw it away and have another go, because mold is potentially a killer. This is a massively huge subject. Food and specific medical conditions is something that I deal with as well. If anyone wants to have a chat afterwards, I'd be more than happy. Silver? Okay, so I'm not going to fill this with water now, because I've got to transport it back to the beautiful Aurora Valley. Basically, this just gets pushed in, so that's an airlock. There's a little grommet there. Push that in there, lift that up, fill it about 1/3 full of water, and as the CO2 pumps out, she goes through there. But thanks, Savannah, I did miss that bit. That's me for now. I'm available to talk about anything you like, except football. And thank you. I would also quickly like to thank Anthony and his team for putting on this event. Thank you, sir.